Hello, everyone, and today we are here for another recap and review of White Lotus Season 3, Episode 3, The Meaning of Dreams. So things do seem to pick up in this episode, but unfortunately, I just don't think this is my season. None of these characters compel me. This episode finally sets up an event where the different storylines are finally going to interact, but it doesn't feel natural in the same way that the interactions between different vacationing parties felt in Seasons 1 and Season 2. Also, I feel like there's a lot of telling and not showing when it comes to these characteristics we're supposed to get from these characters, and it's a little bit disappointing because I don't know, I feel like Mike White plays with stereotypes, but he was a lot better at kind of adding depth to them in seasons 1 and 2, and I'm just not finding any depth to these characters. And I know everyone's gonna come for me, but regardless, I'm gonna speak a little bit about that. But I will praise the cinematography of this film. Like, the first scene of this particular episode was phenomenal, and there's just a lot of different shots that I felt were more connected to the theme of what was happening in this episode. So I really liked that. So let's just get into it and let me talk about this episode. So this episode opens with a beautiful dream sequence of Victoria on the beach while Lachlan is surrounded by two ladyboy employees. Lachlan tells Victoria this is what it looks like before tsunami. The Ratliff, Carolina family home is behind Victoria. The two employees cover Victoria with a comforter, and then the waves overcome her. Victoria wakes up hearing Tim talk to a Joe on the phone about the creation of Kenny Gwynn's Show Kel Fun. I don't know if Joe is his lawyer, but I don't think it is because I think we later found out that Chuck is the lawyer, but I'm presuming maybe Joe is one of these journalists. Regardless, Joe is a part of the team that Tim needs to talk to. At breakfast, Victoria tells her family about her dream. Piper calls the dream a warning, but Saxon dismisses the interpretation, thinking that Piper is just being too spiritual. I think the dream is clearly a reference to how the family / their home is going to be destroyed by the impending criminal charges against Tim. Anyway, Victoria warns Lachlan to stop watching those tsunami videos, and I definitely agree. I used to be like Lachlan. I used to just obsessively watch disaster videos, and that is not healthy whatsoever. Anyway, Saxon flexes his pecs, which Piper catches and clearly judges. I bring this scene up only to say, once again, I do not think this is about incest. I think it's more so about how one family member, particularly in this case Saxon, can sour the water of based on their own expectations of sex and life. And this can come from any member of a family and in many different ways, including when parents are very pushy about kids, usually girls getting married young, or sisters even being overly protective of their brothers and overly involved in their brother's sex life and relationships, which we kind of see in Love is Blind Season 8 with that Dave character, even though I believe that he's kind of judging up the true extent of the interception by his sister. Anyway, Tim is living in a perpetual panic state as he consistently gets calls while he's in a no cell phone zone. Tim rebuffs all the questions about the phone calls, but finally takes the call, which we find out is his assistant, who says that the FBI are at his office, and his lawyer then Chuck gives him instructions not to talk to anyone until they are able to settle affairs. While they're in their suite, Lachlan shows Tim a video of a man standing on the beach while a tsunami overtakes that man. So clearly a visual representation of likely how Tim is going to approach this entire scandal that is coming to him. Saxon then tells Tim that an office worker named Terry is calling them, and he wonders if they should take a call. Fortunately for Tim, Pat comes in with Saxon's requested blender, and so Saxon is distracted and goes and tries to make that protein shake. We then learn that Victoria signed Lachlan up for corrective posture treatment, and Lachlan is clearly offended by this. And I have to say, and I know this is so weird, I do get kind of bothered by bad postures, especially when it clearly affects their attractiveness. And this happens with a lot of women and men. But anyway, I just really hate seeing very bad posture, and I know that's one of my pet peeves. Anyway, Tim escalates his behavior by declining a call on Saxon's phone. In frustration, Tim decides to go along with the no technology vacation and gives the entire family's devices to Pam. Saxon, of course, rages out, but the target of his anger is Piper, even though all of this is about Tim evading confrontation with his issues. Saxon says something about how Piper gets everything that she wants, which feels very left field and childish to me, because, I see how this vacation might seem like being what Piper wants, but I feel like Piper was just being honest. She probably was just having an honest conversation with her mom about thinking about going to Thailand, and they just came along. Like, I don't feel like she was probably like, we need our family vacation to be in Thailand. I don't get that vibe from Piper, but regardless, Saxon's pissed. In a private conversation between Tim and Saxon mentions that he doesn't have a lot of work to do, a clear indication that his job was merely a favor from his father. So it's one of those examples of nepotism where likely there wouldn't be a job opening, but because it's his son, there's a job open so that his son can make his way and get experience so that he could either be hired by other people to get quote unquote real experience or continue along with Tim's business. It's clear that despite all of his misgivings, Saxon is motivated to prove to himself and to his father that he's a man of value to this world. So this is a part of the whole insecurity aspect. Like, he's clearly insecure that he's not able to find his own job and that he doesn't have a lot of work to do. Tim is hesitant to give up his own phone, but eventually gives it to Pam. Piper and Saxon continue to bicker with each other, so it'll be interesting to see how their relationship transforms throughout the season. At the pool, Saxon complains about the non-tech rule and goads Lachlan to finish a protein shake, which Lachlan clearly does not like. Saxon says he wants to get Lachlan laid on their vacation, which I think is very dangerous and is a bad idea. Saxon's perspective on sexual politics is dangerous primarily because he's foisting this upon others as opposed to just making it his own directive. Finally, we see Piper go to the temple, and this is where she discusses with a monk secretary about meeting with a Burin. She says that she needs a meeting with Burin in Luang Por Tierra about a year-long program she intends to do after college graduation. So it appears again that this thesis was just a front because she's apparently having a Buddhist awakening. This turn of events will likely be met poorly by her waspy family. At Lachlan's posture treatment, the wellness mentor immediately clocks that Lachlan is a people pleaser. And I just want to say, I love this mentor. He was blunt, but you could tell he was trying to do that Westerner kindness thing, but he totally didn't know how to. And it was executed in a really funny way. I did like this scene. I also just love the mentor's voice, and I hope that he gets cast in more Thai American productions. At their suite, Victoria successfully entices Tim to take one of her pills. She funnily talks about how the drugs are not addictive, even though she's clearly zoinked out of her mind around 90% of the time. At dinner, Saxon invites the family onto Greg Gary's yacht. He mentions that he was invited. Victoria shows some hesitancy, saying that someone's character can't be assessed simply because they own a boat, but then pushes back when Piper says that most rich people are trashy. So she's kind of a middle ground between Saxon, who's like, if you have money, clearly you got something going on, so we got to be around you. And then Piper's kind of like, all rich people are horrible. And it's kind of that same thing from season 1 in Sydney Sweeney's character, where it's like, rich people are you, Piper. You are rich people. So anyway, Tim missed dinner because of the effects of Victoria's pills. I also like how one pill knocks him completely out while Victoria is able to still be out and about after taking her pills. And it clearly seems like she takes multiple pills throughout the day. So her tolerance of whatever active ingredient is in that drug is very high. The episode ends with Tim secretly taking another one of Victoria's pills while claiming to Victoria that he's not taking any pills. Victoria clearly clocks that something is going on, and I also suspect that Tim is likely going to form a level of dependency on these pills over the course of this vacation. All right, let's go to our toxic friend group. At breakfast, Shratala greets the friend group and Jacqueline praises Shratala for her performance the prior night. Valentine then approaches the women's table to discuss yoga and energy healing. Jacqueline then interrogates Valentine about his life, and this is where we get the first hint that things are going to get a little bit political with this group. Valentine says he came to Thailand before the Russian-Ukrainian war, which is relevant because for those who don't know, Russia actually has been conscripting military-aged men since the war started, and a lot of Russian men are like, I'm not about that life. I did not start this war. You did, Putin. But there's also some economic issues, although it's not very clear because you can't really trust a lot of Russian reporting. But there are some reports from Russian people that they're struggling under the sanctions that have been imposed by Western countries since Russia invaded Ukraine. Valentine says that he was in shipping before coming to Thailand and didn't come to Thailand with his family. I kind of thought the shipping thing was a little weird, but I guess when you have a beautiful face, you could really do anything. Jacqueline then again insists that Lori have a fling with Valentine, which to me just feels pushy and inappropriate. I don't know. I don't like it when it's like, oh, you're a real woman. I don't know. I get this underlying sense that Jacqueline's like, oh, if you're a woman and you're single, you should just have sex with men. But not every woman operates in that way, and that's not always the healthiest way to deal with a failed relationship. Anyway, Lauren does have her energies session with Valentine, which seems to help her a bit. I think that this session actually did relax her. At dinner, Jacqueline asks Lori about her time in the session. Kate expresses her hesitancy at New Age therapies because she sees them as witchy. Jacqueline rebuts and believes that New Age therapies are a great contrast to the patriarchal Judeo-Christian faith and their remedies. Kate then talks about her love of going to church, which comes as a surprise to Jacqueline. Jacqueline is shocked at the concept of a Texan conservatives and said she'd feel alienated in that environment because they are all Trump voters. Lori and Jacqueline dig deeper and ask if Kate is a Republican, and she says she's independent, while her husband Dave is a Republican. However, Kate does avoid answering whether she voted for Trump. She invites the girls to join her at church one day. I personally did not like this conversation. It felt contrived and performative on Jacqueline and Lori's parts. You see, because I'm a black woman born to Haitian immigrants, and I just hate when people act like they've never met a conservative person before. Again, think about what I look like. When most people come up to talk to me and they're conservative, you would think that they'd have a hesitancy talking about that with me, but they don't. Like, I just find it very hard to believe that these two white women were raised in an environment where they knew no one conservative. Like, they didn't have one conservative, really rage baity uncle, or they didn't have any family members that were conservative. I don't think that's real. And again, I say this as a black woman in America, and I've met conservative people along the entire spectrum of conservatism, and it's like, they exist. You have to interact with them when you're at work or even in a family context or what have you. And I don't understand this idea that Lori and Jacqueline are acting like, oh my God, it's such a scandal that somebody's a Republican. I just don't get that. And not to mention, both LA and New York City have places where I've lived, have strong conservative enclaves that especially an actress like Jacqueline would definitely be familiar with. And not to mention, Austin is a quite liberal city. So they're kind of making it seem like Austin is this backward, podunk conservative town when it's like, Austin is weird as shit. There's a lot of like liberal stereotypes in Austin. And I just feel like this whole entire scene was very surface level in its analysis of the American political system and the sentiments of American people today. I also think this conversation is representative of a Gen X writer like Mike White, where people are more attached to the identity of a Democrat and Republican. As a younger millennial, most of my peers tend to just have a disdain for political parties in general, both of them. We vote, and I generally vote Democrat, and most of my friends do as well, but we're not attached to the party in any way. In the same way that it seems like Jacqueline and Lori are. Either way, did not like this convo because I don't think anything truly insightful came out of this depiction of American politics. Like, I don't think that, anyone conservative is going to watch this and change their mind. It just seems very flat. And I don't know, Jacqueline and Lori just are kind of, to me, the most annoying liberal people. And I'm going to say, I identify as a leftist. All right. So I know that sometimes people are very obtuse and, they might say, oh, you don't really go with the Democratic Party. That must mean you sympathize with Trump. Trust me, I've been out here freaking out for the past several weeks about everything that Trump has been doing. And so, yeah. And I also want to say that this video is kind of timely in terms of talking about the Russian war or referencing it, because as we know, on Saturday or Friday, Trump went crazy on Zelensky and people were just like, whoa, this was not copacetic at all. Anyway, later we see Kate discovering Jacqueline and Lori talking about Kate and her history of taking on politics with the people that she's with, which, again, I found this weird because I'm like, hasn't she been married to Dave for at least like 10 years now? So wouldn't they already know that she's kind of switched to a more conservative Republican stance? And I think Mike White also had this issue in season 1 where he kind of tries to make it like people are just discovering these things about each other, even though everything about them tells us that they should know these things already. In season 1, that came up with Sean's character and the newlywed couple, where it's like, don't you think the bride would have been very aware that her husband intends for her not to work? And why is this a conversation they're having on their honeymoon? Regardless, this whole conversation felt very convoluted to me. As you could tell, I just don't like the way that the political part of the show is going. I 100% stand up for people using their art to sort of talk about politics and how that functions in society. But I think that this is just not going to show up being effective and not really insightful in any way that could really help people grasp with what's going on right now. Yeah. And I know that these are all three bitchy women. So maybe the point is like, these liberals are just as bad as the conservatives. But I just didn't feel any depth with this. And to be honest, I knew the girls would eventually talk about Kate, but I thought it would be more so about her being a housewife and not having a job like they do. So I was surprised that it took like this conservative, she's a Republican turn when it's like, you would think Jacqueline and Lori would just be more so shocked by the fact that she's a housewife and just like, what do you do all day? Like you hear those conversations sometimes. Anyway, let's get to Chelsea and Rick, who had quite a bit of screen time this episode. Rick intercepts Shratala at breakfast and comes up with a ruse that he is in the entertainment business and is interested in taking Shratala on as an actor. Rick claims that he has a director in Bangkok and gets Shratala's card for future communication. There is a funny scene where Fabian tries to correct Rick on his pronunciation of Shratala's name, but then Fabian is corrected by Shratala, and so all three of them go back and forth on the pronunciation of Shratala's name, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing right, but I'm close enough. Rick does not tell Chelsea anything about his interaction with Shratala, and Chelsea's frustrated because she sees herself as Rick's life partner. Amrita then comes up to their table and encourages Rick to participate in his scheduled wellness session. Rick tells Chelsea he's going to Bangkok and then really says that she can meet another guy and sponge off of him, which is like, I don't know. Is that the context of your relationship? I wouldn't know. We have not gotten any awareness that, Chelsea's not contributing financially. Anyway, Chelsea then says she's Rick's soulmate, but I'm just, again, confused because the show has not shown us or given us anything to indicate that Chelsea should believe that Rick is her soulmate. They say it, so they say it, but I don't see it. And I think maybe if the show's really insistent on Chelsea believing that Rick is her soulmate, that Chelsea is a bit slow, because you cannot seriously think a guy that treats you like this and so callously can be your soulmate. At Rick's session with Amrita, Rick expresses frustration with the process, and Amrita asks him to seek the grief below the anger. Rick says that he's done bad things in his life and laments never getting to know his father because his father was murdered. He then talks about still getting satisfaction, giving credit to the theories that Rick is seeking Jim Hollinger in order to avenge his father. At the pool, Chloe complains that Gary/Greg is also secretive. Greg told Chloe that Tanya killed herself and that they were only able to find a part of her leg, and I wonder if that part is true, like if only her leg was able to be recovered because maybe it got severed when she jumped off that boat. Anyway, Rick interrupts them and the couple heads into town to get weed. Meanwhile, Saxon joins Chloe at the pool where they start to casually flirt with each other. While in town, Rick successfully acquires Reed and then suggests the pair enjoy a snake show. At the snake show, Rick comments on the poor conditions of the snakes who are stuck in cages. During the snake show, the host funnily goes through cliche lines about facts of the snakes and their contact with the snake handler. He also mentions snakes coming up through toilets and biting people, so I wonder if that will come up in future episodes. Completely out of it, Rick then goes to the cage area of the snake sanctuary and opens the cages, coaxing the snakes out of the cage. Chelsea follows Rick and, while asking what he's doing, gets bitten by a venomous snake. We learned during the snake show that they only have 15 minutes to prevent a fatal bite, so there's an urgency in getting Chelsea to a car so that she could go to a hospital. Anyway, I didn't really believe Rick when he started opening the cages. I don't know. It just seemed a little out of character, but maybe more so because we don't know his character. We don't know anything about him. He's just so secretive. Anyway, later at dinner, Chloe vocalizes that it's crazy Chelsea has now 2 near-death experiences, and like me being criticizing the writer, I feel like this wasn't necessary to say out loud, but here we are. This either means Chelsea's 100% safe or she's 100% going to die. I'm leaning on her being safe, but I also think that Rick has a high potential of being one of the people who dies. Chloe reveals that there's a boat party the next day at Gary/Greg's boat, which sounds very scary considering that Tanya and all the gays died on a boat. And I wonder if the boat that we're going to see in Thailand is the same boat that we saw in Italy where all the events of Tanya's death occurred. Belinda approaches Greg at their dinner table and mentions knowing him from Maui and his relationship to Tanya McQuad. I hope Chloe Googles Tanya McQuad and maybe hopefully makes the appropriate connections between Gary/Greg and Tanya. So Gary/Greg gives Tanya very scary eyes after she has confronted him, and I'm afraid for her safety. Since he'd be motivated to kill Tanya or Belinda, so it's Gary gives Belinda scary eyes, and I'm afraid that he's gonna kill Belinda because in order to keep his secret or keep any connection between him and Tanya's death secret, he needs people who can make that connection out of the picture. So Greg and / Gary also clocks Chloe flirting with Saxon, and it does seem also like a scary look. So I wonder if he will do anything to Saxon once Saxon is on that boat. Back at his room, Rick calls a guy named Frank, who will likely be the fake director for his Bangkok meeting with Shratala. Chelsea confronts Rick and affirms her love for Rick. Again, this is a love affair I do not understand. So let's get into the beautiful Belinda and Pornchai. At breakfast, Pornchai gives Belinda the plan for the day, which includes getting a session with the therapist and then dinner later to discuss what she's experienced so far. When meeting the therapist, Belinda confirms that the milk feed treatment is conducted by all-time masseuses at the hotel, because I think she was thinking, is Pornchai just putting one on me? But fortunately, she learns that it's just what he does. And then Belinda does get the opportunity to have this really cool pool-guided therapy session with Pornchai. At dinner, Belinda praises the White Lotus Thailand team and talks about being depressed before coming to the country because she lost Armand, and we saw that in season 1. They had such a good rapport with each other, but he died in a freak accident. And then she also mentions Tanya flaking and how she flaked essentially to pursue a relationship with Greg. Pornchai walks Belinda to her suite after dinner. He's a bit drunk and lingers at Belinda's door, where he says that he hopes they have good dreams of each other. Belinda is clearly weirded out, although I know Pornchai just seems innocent, and they have an awkward goodbye. So it's cool because it seems like Pornchai may also be forming a crush on Belinda, so that's awesome. While Belinda's getting ready for bed, she hears creaking noises in her suite, and she's rightfully freaked out, especially considering, in my opinion, that Greg / Gary might be lurking. All right, the staff, a little bit more substantial this episode. At breakfast, Fabian talks to Shratala about potentially singing, saying something about how the artistic side of his family was not encouraged. So there's a theme of Fabian just being ignored and underappreciated, and I wonder if he's ever going to break out of that shell. Gaitok provides a banana sacrifice to a Buddhist shrine, and then when he sees Shratala while she's departing for Bangkok, he tries to get her to promote him to security services for Bangkok, or he basically just offers himself to if you ever need me, I'll be there. When Mook passes by Gaitok's security station, Gaitok stops her to discuss his imaginary potential promotion to the Hollinger security team. He flirts with Mook and says that he would leave the island only if Mook would come with him. It's clear that Gaitok is willing to transform himself in any way to secure Mook's affection. Later, the Hollinger security men confront Gaitok and make fun of him for trying to get a job with Shratala. They say that Fabian wanted to fire Gaitok, but Shratala was kind and decided to keep him on. Listen, if Gaitok is the only thing stopping in between an armed robber and access to a property that contains very wealthy foreigners, then the issue is the security infrastructure as a whole, not Gaitok. So even though I understand that there's some blame to put on Gaitok in terms of being distracted by Valentine, at the end of the day, why was he the only person that needed to be distracted in order for somebody to be able to steal all this expensive jewelry at a store? It doesn't make any type of sense. So yeah, I mean, and again, I think maybe that's a part of why this season doesn't work for me. There's a lot of suspension of belief that we have to put into here. I just feel like an average Thailand hotel, especially that's catering to this level of clientele, is going to be so securityed up. Basically the armed robber would have a mile before they could even get into the property to an extent where they could disrupt anything that's happening there. Anyway, at the end of his shift, Gaitok is approached by a more senior security guard who says Gaitok has to meet with Fabian first thing in the morning. Gaitok tries to get assurance that there's no problem, but gets no answers. This gives some credit to the idea that Fabian does want to fire Gaitok for the armed robbery incident. So hopefully this means we get to see more of Fabian's character, because he's clearly, I kind of feel bad for this actor, because he's probably yes, I got cast as the manager in White Lotus, and he probably saw what that did for, Murray Bartlett and Valentina, I forget the name of the actress, Sabrina's, and then of course she's Italian, but those two actors really did benefit by, being able to perform such amazing roles in White Lotus as managers, but I feel like Fabian is not giving the same shake, so we'll have to wait and see if he really is able to prove himself acting wise and also as a character in this next episode. So anyway, I don't have much to say. I think I've expressed my opinion already about how I feel about the season in this episode. So this was Strategic Delusion. Thank you and have a great day.